All right, welcome to today's session. We're going to learn how to create a sales dashboard in Excel from your NetSuite data. Now there's a few steps to this. I'll outline them up front, and then we'll go ahead and actually run through all of these steps. So the first thing we're going to do is create a save search in NetSuite, and that's going to be our source for the Excel file. Second, we're going to create an Excel file, and we're going to load CloudExtend Excel Analytics for NetSuite, and we're going to show how you can set that search on a schedule, so we'll update automatically and refresh in the background. And then third, because we don't want to actually touch that file once we've created it, we don't want people going in there while it's being updated or corrupting the data, we're actually going to create a new Excel workbook, and we're going to connect to that workbook using Excel Power Query. And then finally, we're going to create the pivot tables and charts that we want to use on our dashboard. And then finally, we're going to add those pivot tables and charts to the dashboard. We're going to incorporate some slicers so you can just click a button and then see your data sliced into that one particular filter. So maybe you want to examine a certain product class, a certain quarter, a certain sales rep, etc. We'll be able to do that as well. So let's go ahead and get started first with our NetSuite Save Search. So in this case, I've initiated a Save Search against sales orders. And here I just want to make sure that they're not canceled, that they are not closed. And then I'm only looking for specific subsidiaries for this report. And I've got this additional criteria down here so that I only see one particular line for each product sold. Now on the results, I have a fair amount of fields on the results. We may or may not use all of these, and we'll drop some of these fields using Power Query. So we've got subsidiary, dates, etc. Now the key is with the CloudExtend Excel Analytics, you can't have any duplicate column names. So you want to make sure that you use custom labels to make sure that doesn't happen. These labels will ultimately come over to Excel as your column headers. Now I've done a few things here. For example, one issue I see in Excel is that zip codes will come over as a number format. So here I'm just concatenating a single quote and then the zip code for that customer. So that will come over now as a text field. So we don't need to worry about that zero, that leading zero. And then this is a formula that I've got here that will actually allow us to drill back into the original NetSuite transaction if we wanted to. So this will come over as a field over in Excel as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this Save Search here. We'll preview it. And we've got 10,004 results. So we've built our Save Search. The next thing we want to do is create that Excel file to sync the data from NetSuite. So let's go ahead and create a new Excel file. And I'm going to save this, and I do want to save it on SharePoint or OneDrive for Business, and this is important because it does need to exist online in order for our application to write to that on a scheduled basis. So let's give it a file name of source data, right? So let's call it Sales Dashboard Source Data. All right, next we're going to load CloudExtend. So click on the Data tab, then click on Analyze NetSuite Data. Now I'm already logged in. If you weren't logged in, you would click on Login. That would appear down here. So now I need to connect to that Save Search in NetSuite and bring it into Excel as the base for my report. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Start from Scratch. I'll click on Add Report, and I'll start typing anything in the name of my Save Search. So this was the name of my Save Search, was Sales Orders Regional. I'll go ahead and click on Add, and then Next. Now I'm not actually going to put this one on a schedule, but I'll show you how to do it. So here I could schedule this to run, say, every day at a particular time. And then I could click Add, and then this file will just get updated every day at 11:51 a.m. with the most recent data from the Save Search. I'm going to skip that for now. And I can preview my data just to make sure that this is the data I want to see. Okay, so here's the data that I want to see. So this looks good, no issues there. I'll go ahead and close this, and now I'm going to click on Create. And this is going to bring in all 10,004 rows. And also keep in mind that when you run this in the background, speed's not necessarily a concern. But even here, you'll see that all 10,000 rows are going to come in roughly probably 20 seconds or so, somewhere in that range. All right, so there's our 10,004 rows of data. So at this point, we don't need this file anymore, but we're going to connect to it using Excel Power Query. So we do need to get one piece of information, which is the path to the file. So we click on File, Info, and then Copy Path. Now we can go ahead and actually close this document. And I'm going to open a new document. And I'm going to save this in the same location. And we'll call this Sales Dashboard. So now we're going to use Excel Power Query to connect to our source data file. So I'm going to click on Data, and then I'm going to choose From Web. And here's where we're going to save you lots of time on trying to figure out why something doesn't work. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in the URL from the previous step. I'm going to remove $web equals 1. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. And you'll be sitting there going out doing a number of Google searches. Ultimately, you'll find some articles, some maybe even written by us, on how to actually import your data from a SharePoint file into Excel. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. The next thing I want to do is I want to look at this data and transpose it. I want to make a few changes to the data before it actually comes in for analysis. So you can see I'm presented with the two worksheets that were in the workbook, and as well as the table. If I choose the worksheet, you'll notice that the table, the headers are not promoted to the top of the file in Power Query. So always choose the table. And the table name comes from the search ID. So not the search name, but the search ID that you created in NetSuite. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on Transform Data. And from here, what Power Query does, Power Query analyzes the first couple hundred rows. I don't know if it's 100 or 200, but it analyzes the rows, and then it tries to guess at the right data type for those rows. So you can see it guessed that the date was the right data type. If it wasn't, you can just come over here and click and change the data type. So let's just go ahead and take a look at the data that I have in here. So the data types seem okay. However, on subsidiary, when I see this on a report, I don't need to see Tesla Holdings Beta Division, Tesla Holdings Alpha Division. I only want to see Beta, Alpha, Gamma. So I'm going to click on the subsidiary field. I'm going to click on Transform, and then we're going to choose Extract, and then Text After Delimiter. So I only need to see the text after :space, and I'll go ahead and click on OK. And just like that, now we only see the subsidiary. Not only is this going to work now, but every time this import runs, it's always going to remember these steps and apply these changes. There's one other field like that we need to make the change to. Let's see which one it was. Somewhere over here. Right, the class field. So we want to do the same step with the class field. So I'm going to choose Extract, Text After a Delimiter, :space. And I go ahead and click on OK. So you can see all these steps are being memorized over here. If I make a mistake, I can just click on X and it will remove that step. There's also some fields in here that I don't need. Let's see. Let's go back and take a look. Right, so we don't need the due date field. And we also don't need all of these ID fields. So I'm just going to Control click. And now I'm going to right click and I'm going to say Remove Columns. So now those columns will also be removed from my analysis file that we're actually going to work with in Excel. Something else we need to do is we also want to set this building zip code to text so that it does come in as a text, and those leading zeros will get picked up when we ultimately bring this in. So now I'm going to go ahead. I'm done transforming the data. I'm going to click Close and Load To. Now, just so you can see the results of the data, I'm actually going to choose to load the data as a table. I'm also going to add this to the data model. Now, by choosing to load it as a table, it is going to take up some more memory than it would if I didn't. Typically, you would choose load as a pivot table report if you were going to build a dashboard. And you could then have millions of rows. File size isn't an issue. But because we want to see what this data looks like, just for illustration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and create a table. And you can see here now it's going out, it's bringing in that data, it's transforming all the rows. And you can see here now that we have the date, the due date's not there. All the internal ID fields that we had at the end are not there. So we really have now just the data we need for our analysis. So we've got to think about what we want to analyze. For a typical sales dashboard, I think we'd want to see, sales over some time measurement, sales by rep, maybe by top 10 customers, by division or subsidiary, by state maybe, so geographic regions, by product classification. And we're also going to want to make this dashboard interactive by building some pivot tables and some slicers. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to create a number of pivot tables and a number of charts. So let's get started there. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Insert and then Pivot Table. I'm going to add my pivot table to the data model. And the reason we're doing that is it lets us use Power Pivot. And there's a few unique functions that we can use with Power Pivot that are not available in a regular pivot table. So let's go ahead and click on OK. The first pivot table we want to see is going to give us some sales by date. So let's go ahead and drop in date. And we actually want to see date as a row. So I'm going to get rid of that. And we're going to drop dates in rows. And we don't need to see the months, so I'm going to drag out the month. We don't need to see the individual days, so we're going to drag that out. So we're going to want to be able to see years and quarters, and then we want to see the amounts. All right, and then we're going to choose a number format, and let's just set this as currency with no decimal places. And we can go ahead and we can expand the field, and here we can see we've got sales by quarter ready to be graphed. Now we also are going to want to know the number of sales that took place over a given period of time. So I'm just going to copy this pivot table, and I'm going to paste it right here. Let's go ahead and auto fit our columns again. All right, now rather than summing the amount field, we actually want to take a look at the sales order number. And this is going to be a count of the sales order number. Now, this is where we want to use one of those unique functions of Power Pivot. So the numbers are going to look the same because in my demo data set, there's only one line for each sales order. However, this could be misrepresented. We want to only count unique sales order numbers. So if I click on Value Field Settings and scroll down here, because we're using Power Pivot, we can now count the distinct number of sales orders. So let's just do a little bit of cleanup here. Let's call this year, call this date, call this amount, and then we'll do the same thing here. Year, date, and let's call this total. Okay, got it. Now for our dashboard, we are going to need a chart. So for each of the pivot tables that we add, we're also going to add a chart. So here I'm just going to click on I'm going to click on more column charts here. And then I have some templates that I've already created for the type of charts that I use for my dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this particular chart. And now I'm going to click on OK. So that's bringing in a chart here that I'm going to add to the dashboard a little bit later on. Now there's going to be a calculation that I use later that's going to rely on, we want to put a kind of a card that shows the total revenue, the total number of transactions, and then the average revenue per transaction. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to just create a field here that points to the grand total. And now I need to give this a name. Actually, let's format it as well. Let's format this as currency with no decimal places. Okay, got it. And now let's give this a name. So this will be total sales amount. And we're going to do the same thing with the total here. So then total number of sales. And let's format this as a number with commas. And let's give this a name, total number of sales. And then we have our average sales amount, which is just simply total sales divided by the number of sales. Okay, got it. Let's just copy this format and paste it here. And let's just give this a name, average sale amount. Okay, good. So now we've got the data that we need for our pivot table. One thing we should do, we should name our pivot tables. Forgot to do that. So let's call this pivot sales by date. And we're going to name this pivot table pivot. Let's call it sales quantity. Okay, let's see, what else do we need to do here? Let's just give this sheet a name, so as we add more sheets, we'll know where to come back to. So let's just call this pivot sales by date. Okay, got it. So I'm going to just copy this pivot table, and I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to paste that pivot table here. And the next thing we want to do is look at sales by customer. So rather than looking at year and date, we're going to get rid of those. And we're just going to drop in customer name in the rows. And in this case, we want to see amount. And let's give this a number format, currency. All right, and let's just fix this. So let's insert a chart for our customer analysis. So I'm going to come here. I'm just going to go to more column charts again, go to my templates, and in this case, I want to choose a vertical bar chart. I'll go ahead and click on OK. Now that's way too busy. What we want to do is actually create a top 10 chart. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to choose top 10. So we're looking at the top 10 by amount. Now our chart makes a little more sense, and what we want to do here is we want to see the customers with the highest revenue first. We're going to do something that seems a little backwards, but we're going to say sorts, and we're going to choose smallest to largest, and that shows up inversely on our chart right here. So now we've got a list of our top 10 customers. Again, this is over all time. Later, we're going to add a slicer so we can see this in a more granular level. So let's give this pivot table a name, sales by customer, pivot. All right, now let's copy this pivot table to a new sheet. And now we're going to want to look at sales by class. So we're going to remove the customer name, and we're going to add in class. Here's class right here. So we'll add class as rows. And okay, so we're going to insert another vertical bar chart here. Again, to go with the formatting that I already have and save a little bit of time, let's go ahead and choose my template, and we will choose the vertical bar chart. And let's sort again in ascending order, smallest to largest. The inverse shows up here. Give our pivot table a name. The reason it's important to name our pivot tables is that later on when we add our slicers, we're going to associate them with multiple pivot tables. So rather than seeing pivot table 1, pivot table 2, etc., it'll make it a lot easier to associate them with the right pivot tables. Now this seems like a lot of work. It is, but keep in mind that this is a one-time process. After this, your dashboard is set. It's automatic. So I'm going to go ahead now. Let's just copy the pivot table we just created. And we're going to remove class. And now we want to see the subsidiary. So I'm going to drop in the subsidiary. And in this case, we're going to use a donut chart for this analysis. So let's go ahead and drop in a donut chart. So insert, again, I can click on any chart and go to templates. And here's a donut chart. All right, let's just move these around a little bit, put them out here. Okay, got it. And you can play around with the formatting, etc. Let's go ahead and save this chart, or save this pivot table. Okay, and we've got one more to create, which is going to be sales by sales rep. Going to be a really important one, right? So let's go ahead here. Let's remove subsidiary and add in sales rep. And let's also insert our vertical bar chart. Templates, vertical bar chart. And let's sort our sales reps by smallest to largest. Let's give this table a name, sales by rep. Okay, good. So we have almost everything we need to create our dashboard. Let's go ahead and create an empty sheet. Let's call this sheet dashboard. And now it's just going to be a process of going one at a time. So let's copy this to our dashboard. All right, now when you're designing a dashboard, there's a couple things that I recommend. So first of all, you want to make it look nice. So I'm going to go up here, I'm going to choose View, I'm going to get rid of the grid lines. And I also want to put a background color on here. So I'm colorblind, it's a little hard for me to choose the background colors, but that's okay, we'll manage. So I'm going to come back to the Home tab here. And let's just drop in, let's just say this kind of black right here. Okay, that looks good. So I'm going to just start moving my charts around. Oh, there's one other thing I want to do. I've got kind of a helper file here. So let's go ahead and see if I can find that. Yeah, I've got some logos on here. So I just want to take these logos. You probably have something similar, maybe your own logos or a report name. So I'm going to just copy those in here. And let's just start laying out our dashboard. So let's put our line chart here. Our sales here as well, sales by class. So we've got some information here on our dashboard now. And let's go ahead and create one more pivot table. So let's go ahead here. We've got, say, sales by rep. Let's just copy this pivot table. Sorry, guys, we're going to make one more. But this is pretty cool, actually. So we're going to get rid of sales rep, and we're going to drop in billing state. So let's just call this state. We'll call this amount. And let's just auto fit the column width here. All right, so you're going to find that if you go to insert and then a map, that it doesn't let you do that on a pivot table. So here's a useful trick. So we're going to actually first we want to remove the grand totals from the pivot table. So let's go to design, grand totals off for rows and columns. And now we're going to copy the entire pivot table. And we're temporarily just going to paste it here. We're going to do paste special as values. And now we're going to insert our map. Okay, there we go. Let's give it this format up here. I'm going to get rid of the chart title, hitting delete. Okay, now since the chart is selected, we're going to go to chart design and we're going to go to select data. And here we're going to go back now and select our entire pivot table. So let's just come and drag down. Now, normally there's 50 states, so we want to go down. If we don't have sales in all 50 states, we want to go down just a little bit further than what you see here. So let's go down to, say, 52, just to give us a little wiggle room, and go ahead and click on OK. So now our chart is linked back to the data range in our pivot table. We can go ahead and remove these columns here. And now we're going to copy our charts, and we're going to paste the chart onto our dashboard as well. Now, this is just telling us, it's just a little notice saying that with 82% confidence, our state data was plotted by Excel. So let's bring that in over here. All right, so we have the data that we need. Now it's time to start adding in some of our slicers. So let's go ahead and click a chart. And we're going to go to Insert, Slicer. And then here we're going to see a list of all the available fields for our slicers. So we're going to want to be able to slice by year. We're going to want to be able to slice by quarter. We want to slice by class, subsidiary, and by sales rep. So let's go ahead and drop our slicers in. Now I'm going to just control click on each slicer because I want to select them all and I want to apply a particular slicer style to them. So I've got a custom slicer style that I've already created that's somewhat in along the lines of this theme. So let's go ahead and click off now. Now I want to just bring these slicers up and start making them look a little bit nicer, right? So for year, we want to make this be 4 columns. Let's just drag this out and kind of fit this in just right. We want to do something similar with quarters. So let's bring our quarters here and make those 4 columns as well. So there's our 4 columns for quarters. And again, you can play around with this and get everything to line up just right. Let's drop class in here as well. And let's make class a different number of columns. Okay. And let's spread those out a little longer, just to tidy things up a little bit. And then let's just also do something similar with subsidiary. So subsidiary is going to be 3 columns because there's 3 subsidiaries. So we could actually make it 4 if we wanted to, if we need a little extra room, in case we think we might have another subsidiary come in. All right, so I'm actually going to reset this back to 3 just so everything's centered. If we do have another subsidiary come in, we can always come in and change that. Or there might be a way to center them that I just don't know about. And then finally, we want to do something similar with sales rep. So let's drag this out over here, set the number of columns. Okay, drag this up. That looks okay. I'm actually going to group my subsidiaries, so it makes it easier to move them around. And let's go ahead and put our slicers in, let's say right about there. And let's drag our map underneath there. Now we're almost done. One of the things I like to do to differentiate this slicer area is just put a shape behind it. So let's take a square shape and let's just drag it out like this. We can always move it around in a second. All right, so let's give that shape a color. So we want to make it somewhat black, but we also want it to be a little lighter. So let's go ahead with this color here. And I'm going to just type in slicer options. Okay, and let's make this bold. Let's make it white. And let's center it. Make it a little bit bigger. Now let's send this to the back. Okay, so now we've got an area that holds our slicers. Kind of makes my grouping look a little bit funny here. Let's ungroup just for a second. And tidy these up a little bit. And it looks like sales rep. I need to make that a little bit bigger to get rid of the scroll bar. So now let's connect our slicers to the pivot tables. Now we need to just use report connections for each one of these slicers. And we're going to go ahead and connect them to each pivot table here. And you can see here, we know pivot table 7 was that sales by state that I forgot to rename, but that's okay. We can always fix that later. So let's go ahead and set this slicer to update each one of the pivot tables. All right, so now if we filter on 2022, we can see the top sales reps for 2022, the top 10 customers for 2022. We can look and we can scroll down and we can see the sales by class for 2022, sales by region. We can even look here and we can see that, say, Pennsylvania and South Dakota were the highest states. So let's get rid of 2022. There's a lot of other ways you can slice this if you want to see, say, electronic sales over a period of time. Just click on electronics. And now all the sales data is filtered in just for electronics. A couple more things that I would add in here, and then I think we can stop. I do want to remember when we showed pivot sales by date, we had total sales, number of sales, and average sale. So let's go ahead and bring these in and make them, available at the top of our dashboard here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert 3 text boxes. So here's the first one, and let's just call this total sales. And let's make this bold. Make sure it's bright white. And we want to center this. Okay, so let's copy this. We want to paste this. Whoops. Copy this, and we want to paste this for a total of 6 boxes. So let's spread our boxes out. We're going to have one for total sales, one for total units sold, and then we're going to have our calculations show up on the bottom here. All right, so we have total sales. Let's just change this to number sold. And then this will be average sale. Okay, so we're going to now insert a formula here. Now you can't just use a formula within the text box. You actually have to start it up here in the formula bar. So we're going to click on equals. We know we have pivot sales by date. This is total sales amount. There we go. Now we have bring in total sales. So again, we're going to get rid of the text that came over from copying, equals, and then we're going to go back to sales by date. And this is our total units sold. And then finally, we want our average sale amount. Equals, come back to sales by date, and this is our average sale amount. So let's go ahead and set the format of this. We want a white font, and we want it a little bit bigger and bolder. And is that a real white? Let's make that a real white. Okay, we want to copy this format to each one of these boxes. And now when we click on a specific year, you can see that the total sales will be reflected, number of units, the average sale amount. If you want to see, for a specific class, so let's just say the electronics class, if you want to know what the average sale is, the number sold in, say, quarter over time. So in Q1 2019, 20, 21, 22, etc. So again, lots of different ways that you can slice and dice this data. So in closing, I would say that Excel really is a powerful tool. It's only getting better. It's a great tool for building dashboards. You can even take that raw data, so the source file that we connected to, if you wanted to expand and use something like Power BI, that's a little newer from Microsoft, just connect to that Excel data source and you can build something similar in Power BI. So whether you want to use Excel or Power BI, the key is getting that data to your source file so that you can connect to it. So best of all, this is really relatively easy to do, especially if you know how to build a NetSuite Save Search, or if you're not using NetSuite, if you have a way to connect to your data and then get that data in on a repeated basis. And because Excel is really universally known, if someone key in the company leaves the company, so say you had someone come in and build this dashboard, almost anyone in the company is going to be able to pick up Excel and figure out how to do this in no time. So there's not a lot of knowledge transfer that's actually needed. So there we go. Quick example on how to build a sales dashboard from start to finish. I really hope this helps, and looking forward to seeing dashboards that you've built. Please share them with me. Thanks so much.
If you need further support, please visit our support site at support.cloudextend.io.